Hi there, folks. This is my kind of stop here first tutorial for those of you just coming into Grand Tactician: The Civil War. And this one is all about the tactical battles. It's meant to be brief, give you some basic advice that you can use right away in your next battle. And there are much longer tutorials if you want to get into some of the weeds. My first recommendation at the start of any battle is you got to figure out where the enemy is. And there are really two, maybe three good ways to do this. First, look at the edges of the map. Right? And so my cursor is circling them here. Some of them are whited out, some of them are blue, some of them are red. That just tells you whether troops or supply might come through that point. What you need to follow that up with is most likely using your cav, including your cav scouts or vedettes. Some extreme cases, I guess, skirmishers, if you don't mind sending them off, to find out where the enemy actually is. Once you do that, you're ready to start moving on to the second step. My second piece of advice is figure out where you're going to attack and where you're going to defend. Unless you are just hopelessly outnumbered and everyone kind of has to be on the defensive, I always want to have some forces defending and the others attacking. And you want to take a look at the terrain. Yeah, the map will give you some idea as to what defensible terrain might look like and terrain through which you might want to attack. But I would say go into the kind of 3D, right, the 3D model view, and see for yourself what it really looks like. Choke points that are near, in this case, objectives, those are probably some of the best defensive points on the map. It forces the attack to slow down. If you can find choke points, and on the Bull Run map here, there are a lot of them, which actually kind of reduces their effectiveness. But if you can find choke points that you think the AI is going to have to move through, and there are clear fields of fire, I mean, this one here on Bull Run, you also have elevation, which is really important for artillery, but generally not a lot of trees. Your artillery is going to be able to get a lot of effect. And on defense, one of the things I like to focus on more is the ranged combat aspect rather than the melee aspect. And you want to use terrain for all the advantages you can. I'm also almost always going to try to attack. And for me, what's important for looking for an attack is how easy it is to concentrate dispersed forces in order to get some sort of local numerical superiority, and then just overwhelm whoever the defenders are there, then reform and move on to another part of their line and kind of rinse and repeat while my defending forces hold wherever they're. So an area that has or terrain through which there are pretty significant and I'll say aligned roads that aren't all that circuitous, you're going to want those. I am not so concerned with having an open field to march through to engage the enemy. In fact, a lot of times I would prefer the opposite. I would prefer forests, because what I want to do is I want to get my units into assault columns, and I want them in melee, and I want that combat over quickly, and then reform and go again. So actually on the Bull Run map, without playing this through, I would say an area to think about concentrating is right down here along Balls Ford and then this part of Cub Run, because we can see that the forces here from Cock, he can just go right across the ford. It appears to be unopposed, and they can link up with these forces here who can take these roads. This is through relatively flat and level terrain. They're going to be able to cross the ford here, and they're going to be able to concentrate in the forests. I can get them in assault formations, and then we can start moving into the enemy, and it looks like the enemy is going to be moving forward this way. So for me, it's more about the use of terrain to bring attacking forces together than it is having the smoothest terrain through which to attack. All right, my third tip here is to use skirmishers whenever possible. And while it goes for both attack and defense, because there are uses of skirmishers to do that, I particularly like it on the defending side of things. And here we can actually start our battle, because they tend to slow down the engagement. And as the defender, I'm usually looking for time. I'm usually looking to shoot things out. If I found a good choke point or two, I actually should have more guns in the fight, at least initially. And so slowing it down is exactly what I want to do. Additionally, putting skirmishers out there, it's going to give you an additional unit, which gives you another way of angling fire into an attack. And on maps where, say, you don't know where the enemy is, or you're about to move into terrain you haven't been able to scout, they do decrease the fog of war. And so I might do that with the units that are down here. On the attack, it's never a bad idea to, again, send those skirmishers out first. Make sure that the enemy still is where you believe they are. Begin to fix them in skirmishing, and then allow the assault column, assault formations to come through the skirmishers and hit the enemy while they're still in line formation. All right, my fourth recommendation is to use unit stances. And since we just put out skirmishers, I think a good use of skirmishers is to have them go prone, because they're usually not going to have the numbers to contest an enemy brigade. In this case, it's a regimental battle. Just get them down. Their job is, again, to fix delay, to reduce the incoming casualties, and allow time for your attacking forces to do what they want. Although it's not really part of unit formations anyways, I almost always switch all my units onto long range. I would say especially so if they're on the defense, since, again, we're trying to take those ranged attacks when we can. We're trying to hold choke points where we might be able to kind of fake a numerical advantage. So that's what we want to do. Other than that, the other unit, I think I'm calling them stances here, or at least that's what I should be calling them. The other one that matters is for the cavalry. And the one I would recommend knowing is that when you're going to shoot it out, all right, what you want to do is you want to take them off their horses, and then you want to click up here on Loose Order. Loose Order improves their accuracy, it reduces their incoming casualties. You can also, if you really want to reduce their casualties and you're willing to give up a little bit of range, you can then put them prone. And eventually, I assume that they're going to go prone there. And that really allows them to tie down a force and inflict some casualties on them. Of course, when you're going to send them into melee, though, you want to make sure that they're back up on their horses, because cavalry are more effective in melee when they are mounted. All right, my fifth recommendation has to do with movement, particularly over long distances, and so it tends to apply more to those that are going to be on the attack. But my recommendation is to use division-level marching columns. So again, it's the division HQ. I mean, in this case, it's brigades because it's on a regimental battle. But this is basically the scale of what would be a division HQ on every other battle. You want to click marching columns, and that's going to ensure that when I move this force a really long distance over to here, that they're all doing it on the march. Sometimes they're supposed to do that, but sometimes you'll see them, they'll still be marching in line, and it slows them down, it increases fatigue, all that other stuff. The other thing I would recommend you do is that you make sure, I almost always now manually limber and unlimber the artillery. You do not want those things moving while unlimbered. It's going to be way too slow. So make sure you click that off and do it on your own. This is a bad idea if your forces in, again, say a division game, if they're far dispersed. Say we had, some of that division over there. If you click this to marching columns, what it does is it pulls them together in a marching column, and so they're going to move long distances. But if your forces are already consolidated, it's not going to move them very far, and it's going to ensure that they get over those long distances as fast as they can with as much of their stamina left as possible. All right, my sixth recommendation is to build breastworks, particularly for those units that have been assigned to defend. So you go down here, this is the build icon. Usually there's, or I should say almost always except for deployment phases, there's only one option, which is to build breastworks, so you left click on that. You then right click to start building the breastworks. You drag the mouse to where you want to go. You right click a second time. It then kind of brings you this red, because you can build at an angle, but let's just keep it straight. You then left click to release. Okay, basically the blueprints have been laid, and that unit is going to go over there and construct them. It's going to take some time to do. It's going to reduce the amount of casualties coming in ranged combat. I also find that this is very effective when you have units go prone behind them. All right, folks, and my last kind of tactical tip is to utilize the unit formation step. Now, this is something I played the game for a year and pretty much never used any of these, but I've been using them a lot more recently as the AI has improved at certain aspects, and I found that it really does help. I would say by default the line you're in makes sense. You know, when in doubt, shoot it out. But when you're sure that it's time for melee, either receiving or giving, then I would suggest you use one of these two formations. If you're receiving a charge from cavalry or infantry, it doesn't yet seem to matter. You want to go to the square formation. Usually the AI doesn't use these, and there is an advantage and disadvantage to attacking in. There's a disadvantage to attacking in line, and there's an advantage to being in square formation that doesn't seem to just be in response to a cav charge. Similarly, though I'll cover in a different video on unit prefs, you want to go into melee if you're going to initiate it in attack column. It's going to give you a more favorable balance of casualties than if you go in the straight line, and it doesn't take that long to do. So you can see this unit, this brigade here is forming up, and once you do that, what you're going to want to do to get into melee is hold Alt until you I use left Alt until you see, when you hover over an enemy unit, some cross swords, and then you're going to right click on it, and that's going to give that unit the order to get into melee with that. You would never want to attack from that far away, right? We're not doing that kind of stuff in this video, but when you get your units close together, and then you're going to want to 2 and 3v1 each of the enemy defending brigades to finish them off. And remember, after you've gone in and you've charged in and you've won, or you've successfully formed square and you beat off the charge, you should always go back to single line unless there is another imminent melee coming your way. So that's it for the tactical tips. The next and final part of this video is just going to briefly touch on a few things you can think about in campaign that might improve your game on the tactical map. Okay, folks, my first bonus tip here on the campaign map is when you're looking at your order of battle and you're putting your armies together, you want to have a decent mix of all three branches: cavalry, artillery, and infantry. I can give you rules of thumb, and I guess this is what I'm working with right now. I would pay less attention to the army level and just look at it within the core and the division structure. This is what I've been working with for the last few campaigns, and I think it makes some sense, but you're going to have to find what works for you. But the point is that each of these branches, they offer something, but they usually have some sort of drawback. And so by having all three in whatever you determine to be the appropriate ratios is going to allow you to get the advantages of all three, and by having the other two there, it can negate some of the downsides or the shortcomings of any one branch. All right, folks, my final recommendation for the entire video, though it has three small parts here, is to think about having infantry brigades that are almost always attacking or defending, as long as circumstances allow them to play that role. And there are different reasons for doing that. One reason is that early on in the whenever you begin your campaign, there's usually a shortage of quality firearms. There aren't that many that have good range and accuracy. So in those periods, I want to give the higher quality firearms to my defending brigades, who I'm generally going to count on to shoot it out more than melee it out. I'm okay with giving my lower quality rifles, mixed muskets, Springfield muskets to attacking brigades because they actually have a lot of power, but you just got to get close enough to use them. The accuracy isn't that great, and we're mostly going to be using, the butts and the bayonets of them in melee anyways. So if we don't have enough to go around, that's how I'd prioritize it. The second reason why I'd suggest you think about having brigades that are attack or defense oriented is because you can tailor their perks, the brigade level perks, to their function. I would say that for the defending brigades, I think engineering, which I also find is the fastest to level up, sharpshooter, and ace of spades tend to be some of the really good defensive brigade perks. And on the attack, Zouaves is okay. The perks that enhance their melee abilities and allow them to increase the cohesion of their units, all of those things I think tend to translate towards units that do a lot of marching and melee. The final reason why I'd urge you to think about having some assigned attacking and defending brigades is for your commanders. In general, you just want, and that was just random that I clicked on Pierce, you want your better commanders on the attack. And you're looking particularly for cunning, leadership, and initiative to have more stars. Lower quality commanders, they may have other good attributes. Put them on defense. If they're particularly high ranking, maybe they'll make sense at the Division HQ level. I don't do a lot of messing around with the order of battle, so it's not my thing, but doing that should give you another edge in your tactical battles. So that's going to be it for this video. I'm going to put other links to other tutorials and other resources that can help you learn the game if you want to invest time on that. But I think if you apply the stuff that I suggest in this video, it should up your game immediately. So good luck out there. Let me know if it helped, and hope to bring you more in the future.